forget the beef between artists like Tupac and Biggie, 50 Cent and Ja Rule, 50 Cent and Rick Ross, 50 Cent and, well, just about everybody. But no one saw this next one coming. Wait for it. Jay-Z and... I'm sorry, but yes, none other than singer, actor, and civil rights activist Harry Belafonte. Earlier this week, Jay-Z responded to Belafonte's year-old criticism of Mr. Carter's lack of social responsibility.
Even in the African-American community, like someone like Belafonte makes a comment, you get offended by that. Like,
I'm offended by that because, first of all, and this is going to sound arrogant, but my presence is charity, just who I am. I felt like Belafonte, he just went about it wrong, like the way he did it in the media, and then he bigged up like Bruce Springsteen or somebody, and it was like, whoa, you just sent like the wrong message all the way around. You know what I'm saying? You bigged up this, I mean, Bruce Springsteen is a great guy, you know what I mean? Like, you were this civil rights activist, and you just bigged up the white guy against me in the white media.
Yo, it got real Friday night on MSNBC's All In with Chris Hayes. Belafonte had this to say.
I would hope with all my heart that Jay-Z would not take personally what was said, because it was not said about him personally. It was a question asked by a leading question given by a member of the press in Switzerland. Having said that, I would like to take this opportunity to say to Jay-Z and to Beyonce, I'm wide open. My heart is filled with nothing but hope and the promise that we could sit and have a one-on-one and let's understand each other, rather than trying to answer this question and answer these nuances in a public place.
Just think if Biggie and Tupac had handled it that way. Back at the table, Michael Eric Dyson, Representative Barbara Lee, anthropology professor Jonathan Rosa, and Elon James White. Beef between Harry Belafonte and Jay-Z, whose presence is charity.
I'm one of probably the three people on Twitter that said, I get his argument. It was just really badly made. We deal with situations and spaces like, literally, there are nonprofits that do nothing but raise awareness around things, right? That is their job, to raise awareness. Sure. Jay-Z shows up somewhere, like the Trayvon March, or he automatically, that was the story. Everywhere, it's like, like Jay-Z and Beyonce, Jay-Z and Beyonce. He did raise the profile of that particular event.
So his presence in that sense,
his presence did, in fact, add something to it. Now, please note, this is a terrible way of making this argument, and you can easily make the argument that as artists, especially once you grow to a certain level, that you could say you owe something back to the community, that you should speak out more and do these things. But it's not, one, you can't force people to do that, and two, when he does do it, it does kind of matter.
So it's not just that he's a businessman, he's also a 501c3.
You're buying magazines, stoking the beef.
I know, I am stoking the beef. I don't mean to do that, I'm sorry.
Here's the deal. I have to be a public disclaimer. I'm friends with both of these men, so I admire them greatly. But of course, Harry Belafonte is in a league by himself, because when John Lewis made a criticism of my first Dr. King book, and people came to me, I said, there is nothing possible that Mr. Lewis could ever say to make me say anything but thank you very much. However, I think that we can say to Mr. Belafonte, there might have been a different way you could go about this. You could have called, you're a high-profile guy, he's a high-profile guy. You can call him up and say, look, I got beef. You can't now walk it back by saying I didn't make it personal. Yes, you did, and guess what? That's why we're now paying attention, because you made it personal with Beyonce and Jay-Z, and you challenged them, as you perhaps should, and then Jay-Z responded. Now I think what they need to do is to take it to another level. These two great titans of their particular industries, and don't get it twisted, there was a great price that Jay-Z paid and Beyonce paid. A lot of people didn't want them to show up at that Trayvon thing, because we know commerce is at stake here. So let's not pretend we don't understand that.
Mike, I want to push on two of these things, because I think two things. Well, you said lots of important things, but two that I want to highlight there. So one is the idea that I want to be really careful that we are meant. So Mr. Belafonte is undoubtedly in a class by himself. Like that's why it's kind of silly that they're having beef, right? Because you can't really have beef with Harry Belafonte because he wins, right?
Everybody's a vegetarian.
Right. But here's the issue. I do worry about the intergenerational thing that happens when what we do is simply sort of, bow at the feet of our elders, right? I do think that it is important for young people to be able to be critical of the civil rights generation.
Yes.
In part, I mean, it's part of what would make the CBC stronger. Like, we have to both revere them and push them. And at the same time, I also worry a lot about this. Let's not do it in public. Let's do it in public. Let's go ahead and engage in our public. No,
Okay,
not down with
it's
that.
not so much that let's do it in public. The idea is that in that particular situation, I agree with Dr. Dyson. It was a personal jab. He could have reached out. He's Harry Belafonte. Harry Belafonte can talk to anybody he wants to. And so he could have reached out in that situation. And so I can see being hurt. Now, whether or not he had a valid point is not the argument. It's about the feeling of someone coming at you, especially someone from like the civil rights time. I would be freaked out if all of a sudden someone came at me.
But you know what? 90% of people don't have. Now, I think Melissa Harris Perry is right in this sense. That's Jay-Z and Harry Belafonte. Most of us ain't got no access, ain't got telephone numbers or emails. So now we have to use the public forum to articulate disagreement and dissent. And guess what? It's all right. Because look, when it comes to President Obama, if you're an African-American person, you can't express criticism of him. Of course you can, but you do it out of respect for what the traditions are. At the same time, young people have to be able to, like Outkast, appropriate the past, use Rosa Parks' name to create a consciousness, and let's just not sue.
Right, I mean, Congresswoman, I want the CBC and President Obama to have beef, right? In the sense that I want them to be able to be jointly critical and engage publicly with one another.
Yes.
Sure. Well, we're three branches of government.
Yes.
The Congress has its responsibilities to represent their districts and also to put forth an agenda that speaks to those who have been shut out of this country's economic and social system. And so we absolutely have a duty and responsibility to push hard and push the envelope on behalf of the country. And on behalf, of course, of our district. But let me say also, I think the debate that's taking place now with regard to Jay-Z and Mr. Belafonte is healthy. It's intergenerational. And you know what he reminds me of? There's this saying in the Akan language in Ghana, Sankofa. In order to move forward, you have to understand your past. Mr. Belafonte not only was a great entertainer, he was very active in the civil rights movement. So there could be a Jay-Z and a Beyonce and others. And so I think that we have to make sure that both voices continue to be heard, because that's the only way that communities of color in the African American community can move forward. And it's Sankofa. We need to really understand that experience.
Yeah, and it of course gives lie to the notion that we all think the same thing or that we're all in agreement. I do want to I want to bring you in part on this, like, just call me instead of having the public forum, because I actually think part of what he's doing is using the public forum. But also I got a little Elon James White conversation to be had, because after the break, the N-word and Tim Allen, I swear, I'm serious. I'm about to make beef between Elon James White and Tim Allen when we come back. In the latest voice to enter the conversation, comedian Tim Allen, star of the sitcoms Home Improvement and Last Man Standing. In an interview with the Tampa Bay Times, he argues that white comedians should not shy away from using the N-word and should be more direct in the tradition of comics like Richard Pryor and Lenny Bruce. He says the euphemism N-word is actually worse than the actual word. Allen tells the paper, quote, "You want to take the power away from that word so that no one is offended by it. If I have no intent, if I show no intent, if I clearly am not a racist, then how can N be bad coming out of my mouth?" And what I appreciate about what Tim Allen is saying here is that it is complicated. And given the kinds of uncomplicated things I've said, at least there's some thoughtfulness here. But I do just want to ask, Elon?
I would like Tim Allen to shut up. Here's why. First of all, I'm getting a little bit tired of white dudes telling me, one, what I can say or what they can say, and then two, about my neighborhood and my community. I'm getting a little tired of it across the board, because they're talking directly about people like me, like who are from the hood, who grew up single parents and stuff like that. And then about the language thing, being a performer for years, I've heard people make this argument, oh, I can say whatever you want. Anything can be funny. I do not deny that. Anything. I'm not someone who tells people they can't tell jokes. But 99% of people aren't funny. And then on top of it, even the people who think they're funny, half the time, their material sucks. And so you're sitting here, you want to make an argument that we should just say the word. We're going to say the word, and we're going to take the power away from it so no one can be offended. Guess what? I'm offended. And you can't make it, listen, you can hear how I'm saying it. Guess what? You're just another pinpoint in the larger issue overall in America. You are now adding the thing like, listen, man, I'm just trying to take the power away from it. Shut up. You don't have the right to take the power away from it.
The other thing is, if Tim Allen wants to carve out a space for himself in which he can use language however he wants, go for it and try it out and see if that works and see how it's received, right? If he thinks he's capable of doing that. But it reminds me, his commentary, this notion that, you know what's in my heart. You know what I really believe. This idea that it's not entirely unlike Rand Paul's commentary. You know, I don't have a racist bone in my body, this sort of thing. So if you know what's really in my heart, then I can say whatever I want, which really undermines the idea that language shows us what's in your heart, right? That language is a way of revealing your heart in a sense.
Well, and you don't necessarily have the power to take, I mean, the notion of taking power away linguistically, right? I just, I try to be an ally in certain movements, and I mess up, right? I've had folks in LGBT communities, I've had, Jewish friends come to me and say, that not so much. I know that we know you're our ally, we know you're down with us, but demonstrate that you are down with us by not saying these things anymore. And for me, the ally response is, basically the ally response is sometimes to shut up.
See, that's the point. See, he wants to move from ally to reassume the appropriate privilege of whiteness, which is to dictate the terms of the debate. Look, y'all invented the N-word. We didn't invent it. We just co-opted. We hijacked it. We did a carjacking on that word a few decades ago, and now you're mad because we've made more sexy use of it, some denigration as well, and now you want back in. No, you can't have back in. I refuse to infantilize white people. He says it's confusing to me. It ain't confusing. Here's a general rule of thumb to follow when using the N-word for white people. Never. When you do that, then you understand you can't do it. And then finally, I think what's interesting here is that using this kind of word, as Chris Rock said, white people control the whole world, but they feel if they can't use the N-word, somehow their power has been removed. No, grow up, allow us to determine what is in and out, and as a result of that, be our ally and challenge white people not to use it at home. You're already using it, you just want to use it in public.
Yeah, Melissa, you know what? I don't buy his explanation. First of all, it's a deep psychological, sociological analysis that he put out there. Come on, he should know better. He should know better, and I think I agree with what everyone has said here. This is something that's, first of all, very offensive to the African-American community. You couple that now with what's taking place in terms of racial profiling, in terms of all of the income inequality, poverty rates, food stamp cuts, Medicaid,
the structural
structural issues. This is very dangerous and volatile, and you just don't do that.
I'm use the B word around me all the time, but I don't use the B word.
But right, you don't get to use it. I'm such a softie because I really I read it and I was like, well, at least he's trying. I was thinking maybe we could book him. Okay, they all just say be quiet. Yeah,
he's also basically like a smaller version of America as itself. Like if my heart says this, then I can't be racist.
Right, the
that
intent.
Is nonsense.
Well, that was the actual thing on which the entire Zimmerman verdict.
You don't have a racist.
Michael Eric Dyson, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Jonathan Rosa, and Elon James White. You know this is going to keep going in commercial break. Up next, what my daughter and I do during summer vacation.